Mike McCool here in the Royal Examiner studio, and with me today is Grace Morrison. Grace is a candidate for the delegate, Virginia delegate in our district right here in Warren County. So, like I ask all candidates, why in the world do you want to do this?
You know, Mike, I love when I was watching Lance Allen and he said to you, I don't.
Yeah, he did say that. I don't want to do this.
I don't know that anybody really craves the work involved in running for office. But I want to run for the 31st District because I believe that they deserve a representation of the people, not someone who will be motivated towards party hierarchies more than the values and principles that I think the people hold. And so that personal representation, I feel, is necessary. That's why I'm here.
That's good, good. So what do you say? I'm kind of glad that we've finally got our district back into having like one delegate.
Right.
Compared to, people say, well, you got three delegates. I said, it's like having three kids, three little boys. You have no boys. You can't get them to do anything.
Right.
So it's kind of along
I
the
have
same.
no experience with that. Yeah, no, you're right. And having somebody central to our communities that's not on the outskirts, but somebody like in-house who can clearly articulate the needs of the people in the state office is what is so important.
Right. What are some of the things that you're passionate about as far as for our district and taking things to the House?
If I could sum it up in 3 words, it would be transparency, accountability, and common sense values.
Well, those are 3 tough subjects.
Yeah, they really are. And I was thinking about the toughness of the subjects. And I was thinking about, as a mom, I have a lot of cleaning that gets to be part of my job description.
Isn't that amazing how they just dump that on you?
And when I am dealing with a situation in my house, it is so easy to throw something in a drawer.
Sure.
It works that way. We throw things in a basket. What nobody wants to do is get them out and dig through and figure out, where does this go? What is going to best suit the real operation of this space? And I think we need to get to work on those kinds of things.
That's a good description. We all have a junk drawer in our house. Isn't that amazing how our culture, I think every household I've ever been to has got a junk drawer.
Yes.
And you're right. Everything that's in there has been in there for years.
For years.
And I think it's the same with, we just kick things down the road.
Right.
The federal
and we
government, state
facilitate
government.
the status quo. And I think it's one thing to complain that things are the way that they are, that we have all of this confusion, chaos, whatever. It's another thing to say, you know what? Okay, yes, we do have a mess. Let's roll up our sleeves and not participate in the same cycles that have gotten us here.
Right.
But maybe change something in our approach to the situation that better facilitates what we've said from the beginning we wanted. And the House of Delegates from the beginning in Virginia was designed so that the farmers, so that the teachers, so that the moms had a voice, and that it wasn't left up to distanced political figures who weren't even interested because they weren't even involved in those kinds of things. It's kind of like having people on a school board that aren't teachers or have never been in a classroom.
Right.
It's really challenging to navigate those things that are really important and fundamental.
Right. Or have no children.
Right.
Yeah. It's a lot different when you're seeing it from the one side or, from the other side.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things that you're going to say? You're elected, you go down to Richmond at the next appointed time. What are some of the things that you want to try to see to get done first?
That's like cleaning the bedroom now. Okay.
Where do you start?
We're going to start in the closet.
Yeah.
We're going to start in the closet. One of the things that I really want to begin to be able to communicate, facilitate, energize, galvanize is the people on the ground putting themselves back in position to be heard. I had a conversation with a voter a few weeks ago, and he said, my sister had a very deep concern with one of the issues. He said, I don't even actually remember what the issue was, but I remember that it was important enough for her to reach out to her official. and I will not name her official, but it was the local Virginia official. She reached out, she addressed her concern, got a phone call back from the official, said, I hear you, I understand that you're concerned, but the people voted for me, and I'm going to do what I want to do. And I thought, well, that is just not a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And so one of the first things I want to do is somehow galvanize the heart. And I really think we're getting there. I mean, I'm talking to people and they are worked up about all the things. How do we intentionally pursue the hearts of those we have sworn to represent well? And so I've talked about a few of those things, and I have a friend of mine who's been in political office, and one of the things that worked well for them was a teletown hall. And I said, tell me the process of that. And I said, because that seems really confusing with everybody talking over everybody on a telephone.
Yeah, it seems that way, but it's not. It's really fairly simple.
They explained the process to me, and I'm not a techie person, so I was just like, that is amazing. So one of the things that I will do is have regular teletown halls. Now, another thing I'm going to do is obey my mom. Even in my 40s, I'm still going to obey my mom. She said, don't you dare put yourself behind a phone or a screen. You put yourself in the presence of the people you're representing. And so I'm going to put myself in the presence of the people I represent on a regular basis and give them an open floor to ask me what they need to ask me, to share the concerns so that I can do the research necessary to make sure their needs are being met.
You mentioned this because it's like all our local, or from our local officials up to our federal officials, I encourage people all the time to engage a conversation with them because that's their job is to represent. I've used our congressman and our senator on several occasions. And you know what? They respond and take care of the situation.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, well, they can't do anything. And sure enough, he said, well, I really can't do much, but I'm going to make a phone call.
Sure.
And sure enough, they called me back. And so it's true. From our town council to our board of supervisors, if you don't speak up, just thinking that someone else is going to do it is not the case. Sometimes we need to step out there and say, well, at least you voiced your concern.
Sure.
Because I would say, though, that you be sure you register to vote and vote on these things because, you know, we have a lot of complainers, but a lot of times these are people that don't even vote.
It has been my favorite thing to do since the day I turned 18 was vote.
Right. So when you're talking to people, say, do you vote? Oh, no, I don't vote. My vote doesn't count. It does count.
It counts. It counts from...
How about those people that got them one by one vote?
Right. Right.
And it happens.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. We've had some very close votes in the recent primaries that we just finished up. In fact, we had a senator in Richmond that missed the primary by a handful of votes.
Right.
It was wild. An incumbent. So that was shocking.
Yeah, people just think they're always going to be elected. You're right, though. You can see we've had people in our local area that have been the only candidate on the ballot, and yet they still get out there and work it because instead of just sitting back. And that kind of, you can tell the kind of person they're going to be when even these sole candidates get out there, put their signs out, go knock on doors and do things, even though there's no one running against them. But I think they want to do a good job, and I think that kind of separates the men from the boys and the women from the girls, so to speak.
And you know what? Sole candidacy is one of the motivating factors that got me here. Because I am a massive advocate for free and fair elections. And we've had so much turmoil in the elective process. And I think, you know, if we're going to have real elections, we need to have real people to elect.
Right.
And if somebody is in a race, it's not really a race if you're just strolling down there all by yourself, right?
Exactly.
So if somebody's in a race, first of all, we need to evaluate transparency, accountability. How'd you get there? How many people had a say in the fact that you are even running to be a representative? And maybe nobody did. Maybe you're kind of like me and it was like a really personal decision. And that's good too, because what we need is people who consider these things important enough to put themselves in the messy room, pick up the things one by one, even if it's a mess, and start to put order to the framework. And so one of the reasons I chose to run is because at the time I chose, there was nobody else running. And I had an elderly lady who's worked in government for all of her life. And she looked me square in the eye, and it felt scary to me. She looked at me with authority and said, Grace, people need choices.
Need choices, exactly.
And so I said, well, okay. Yes, ma'am.
We have, and that's like in the local, this is a local election too.
Yes.
But I mean, we look at it, you're saying, I talked to a lot of people, I said, why aren't you running for an office? Why don't you run for an office? And, well, no, I can't. They just give all sorts of excuses. But the people that are really qualified just don't want to run because they just don't want to put up with it.
That and
the abuse we take,
Right. And that was, that was one of the arguments when my husband said, why don't you run? I said, I don't want to. Why do I have 3 small children.
Yeah. Here you thought your husband would run.
Right. Yes. Well, Hatchak, bless you.
Yes.
But I have 3 boys who are in school. I teach at their school so that I can be present in their lives. I'm a super big school choice advocate. I'm a super big education advocate. I'm a super big build up our public schools so that they are quality educational edifices where our children can be built into what they were born to be. And I thought, man, I don't, no, why would I do that? But he said, well, you're sitting there worried about the fact that nobody is changing anything, and yet you're still part of the lack of change because you weren't willing to become uncomfortable enough to just be the voice, be the person. So, another intrinsic motivator to bring me to this point.
You mentioned school choice. That's a really hot topic.
It really is.
Right now. And, of course, the governor is, I think, is kind of encouraging school choice or parental choice. Maybe is a better word for it.
Well, I'm a parent, and you're not going to get me away from parental choice and parental rights because nobody has more value in what goes on in a child's life than their own parent.
We don't want the government raising our children.
No, we certainly do not.
I've heard that this week.
My goodness. Last words you want to hear Ronald Reagan said was, here's the I'm from the government, and I'm here to help.
Right.
Okay, so, no, we don't want that. We want individual liberties. That's what we were built on, is individual liberties. Here's my issue. I am massively pro school choice. I think taking choices away from parents and children is, I have very strong words for that. I'll just call it abominable at this point. However, our public school system, here's the fear from those who are like, no, I don't want anything to do with that because I can't afford to put my children anywhere else because there are no choices.
Right.
I have to work full time. I cannot homeschool my child. Now listen, I tried to homeschool. I homeschooled for 3 years because I taught in the public school. I taught in the private school for decades before I became a mom. And I said, Lord have mercy, I cannot put my children in the kind of public school I taught in. I was a little more urban than the ones here. I've not been in these schools as a teacher, but it was, I mean, I had to stand at my door and call the resource officer on a consistent basis because I had taught chorus and I had a stadium classroom, and they would tumble into the class, as in tumbling over each other. So these were things, as a mom, I did not want for my children. And however, I at third grade said, my child is a lot like me, and I'm a people person. And even though we had co-ops, we had lots of resources, and believe me, this community has amazing resources. If you're going to homeschool, you ought to move here to the 31st District because the resources for homeschooling parents are off the charts. Even with that, it was not enough for mine. And it wasn't enough for me because the moms I was around that were homeschooling were about 100 times more organized and they had classrooms in their house, and I'm just going,
they go all out.
what? And so the Lord provided an opportunity for my kids to be in a school where I could also teach. So now I'm getting a little bit of a break. So even though I'm with my kids, I'm teaching a subject matter that I'm passionate about.
Keep an eye on them.
And I'm able to be accessible, and someone else isn't taking my role in their life. So, but that's not the story for everybody. I was raised by a single mom. Homeschooling for me was not an option. And she did the very best she could. I was in private school all the way up till the 10th grade. Now, that's another story. We'll probably have to tell that one off camera. Not because it's salacious, just because it takes too much time. But my mother was the strongest, toughest bird you ever want to meet. And when my grades did not match the effort she was putting in to pay for my schools, she said, well, then you're going to get to go to public school where I don't have to pay as much. And it ended up being a wonderful season for me. But we've got to build the respect for our teachers. We've got to be student-centric. We can't be politicking our school systems. We've got to empower the people who are taking care of our children so that our children have a hope and a future beyond anything we've ever experienced. You know, I was taught that as a parent, my plateau is supposed to be the launching pad for my kids. And I think as parents, that's what we want. We want our kids to have something bigger and better to go to than what we started out with. And our public school system needs to be brought in. We need to go in the closet and start folding clothes because we have created a mess with bureaucracy and all sorts of unnecessary things that have become other than student-focused education.
Become a national issue.
Right.
It's a national issue, not just something local. It's a big time. It just went on, goes back to kicking the can down the road and letting government do this and unionized things do this and parents not being involved in their child's life because we've got two working parents, we're busy, we're being stressed. And COVID comes, and I think that really showed the light, it really brought to light a lot of our problems in the school system.
Not only did it do that, but now we have 2 to 3 years of children at critical times in their development who did not learn the skills, the basic skills, self-management skills in that time because there was no requirement for it. So we're going to have to reteach basic, simple things like you need a notebook for this. You need a pen and you need to have a pencil sharpened before you come to class every day. Well, that just seems like common sense. But if you haven't had to do that at these critical points of development, then you don't have those skills. Right. So we have to rethink the way we're approaching these kids and the way just going back to the basics.
Yeah, we're going to see that as they enter into the workforce. Absolutely.
Right. Absolutely. If we don't address it, we have 2 or 3 years max of this, overall thing, right? Some people have had longer depending on how their family dealt with it, right? And so if we take the time now to do the meticulous, laborious, difficult tasks of retraining and reframing, and we realize first that we need to. Because, see, when I know how to do a thing, sometimes it just goes off of my head that I have to teach you how to do it. When I was teaching my kids how to scramble eggs, I'd say, just scramble the eggs. Well, what does scramble mean?
Exactly.
What does that mean, Mom? Just scramble them up. Well, show me what that looks like.
Exactly.
And so we have a lot more ahead of us to do. And if we want to continue the status quo, we will lose this generation. We will. Okay. Because we've got to go back and teach it.
So I can say you're pro-choice for schools.
Yeah, I'm pro-choice for schools. Yes, I am.
What other kind of topics are in the news that you're that you have an opinion on or a position?
Oh, how long is this going to be?
Well, we got a lot of time. But
another thing that's really near and dear to my heart. There's a film that's out right now called Sounds of Freedom. Mm-hmm. And it's about the current Holocaust that we're facing as a nation, which is the trafficking of human beings. And in conjunction with that trafficking is the trafficking of illegal substances. And so having programs that we have to focus, I'm going to go back to the closet. We have to focus on the small thing to get to the big thing. We have to have transparency and accountability at the smallest level in order to take care of the big picture. And so I am very interested in making sure that we're not closing our eyes to this issue in front of us as a state and as a locality, that we are invested in our people to the point that we know what's going on and we're willing to get to work on it.
Yeah. Anything else you want to bring up before we close?
You know, Mike, if I could say anything to voters, if nothing else were to come of my investment in running in this race, if I speak to one mom at your kitchen table, one dad who's just trying to get all the stuff squared away so he can go eat dinner with his family, one teacher, one business owner to say, you know what, I'll do it too. I'll get in it and I'll run too, and I will not just vote, not just say what is important to me, but I'll actually invest myself in the process, because it's going to take all of us. Not one candidate can solve our problems. Not one. Not from me to the school board to the president's office. Not one of us can solve it. This is a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And that's the challenge of a constitutional republic.
It is.
We have it if we can keep it.
That's it.
And in order to keep it, we all have to do the work.
Do our part.
Yeah.
Grace, it was nice talking to you. Good luck on the
pleasure.
election. It's coming up. Well, the early voting is in September.
September, I
so if
believe,
you
23rd.
if you haven't registered yet, you still have time, and we need
Yes.
to get registered. If you're
Yes.
not, and put it on your calendar to vote. If you vote early, that's okay. But the election is November 7th.
Yeah.
We have our delegate. We have actually our also our state Senate race.
Yes, sir.
And we have some town council seats.
Yep.
We have our Commonwealth Attorney.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a clerk of the court, the county treasurer. There's several offices. So it's going to be, it's kind of when it's not the presidential election. So people kind of like, oh, it's not that important. But these
It
are
might be more important, Mike.
I was going to say, these
It
are
might
some
be more
important offices.
Yes.
So please vote. You can vote early, starting in
Yeah.
about the middle of September. I think it's the 22nd. But also November 7th is the election. So please do.
Yeah.
Grace, I thank you so much for getting on the ballot, and
Thank you for
hope
having
you are successful. I tell that to all the candidates, but everyone can't win.
That's right.
But I think good people need to run.
Running is a win.
It is.
Getting involved
You
is
learn
a
a
win.
lot, don't you? You've
Sure.
already learned some things that you didn't know
Sure.
existed.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I appreciate it so much.
Thank you for
thank you,
having me.
Grace.